Well, the prosecutor making some solid points there. Certainly, if you watch that on your own, you would say, wow, that babysitter is guilty. What do you think was the strongest part of that portion that we listened to, Rachel?
Well, I think several of our legal experts have said, in terms of a closing, she really nailed it. She laid out the charges, she laid out the evidence that they had, put it in a neat package for the jurors to consider. However, you do also, of course, have the defense closings, and I think that they did a pretty strong job as well, raising some reasonable doubt as to what actually caused her to die.
And we're going to listen to some of the defense closings in a moment. One thing the prosecutor says here is, the injuries are consistent. The medical examiner ruled that this little girl died of traumatic head injury. And the other really prickly thing, obviously, here for the defense is that the defendant, Lindsay Partin, admitted in a police interview that she slapped the girl, that she shook the girl. She had said it was because the girl squeezed ketchup in the toilet. However, is that enough? And I know we heard a lot of expert medical testimony, but is that enough, you think, to convince jurors that the injuries that killed this girl, we're not talking about she had a welt on her face from being slapped, that the injuries that killed these girls were caused by the babysitter?
Well, listen, it certainly doesn't bode well that you have her in these tapes admitting, and she admitted to that on the stand as well, to doing these abusive things to this young girl. But again, I don't know if that necessarily means what she admitted to caused the child's death directly, and that's the disconnect that the jurors are going to have to reckon with and see what they decide here.
And I think that, the prosecutor herself says in the closing, look, there are only two people who know what happened, the little girl who's dead and Lindsay Partin, and I think that's the problem. No one knows the exact sequences, the exact events that led up to her injuries, to her death, and I think because of that, maybe there will be some reasonable doubt, but we'll have to see. Well, that was one of the more technical parts of Melinda Cook Howard, the defense attorney's closing argument, where she sort of went line by line through phone records between the defendant and Jason Weshy, the little girl's father. But I think it's important to point out that right from the beginning of her closing argument, she said this case shouldn't be Ohio versus Lindsay Partin. It should be Ohio versus Jason Weshy. And she has been trying to hammer home the point that it was very likely the father who did this. I mean, she says the state failed to properly investigate him. They failed to properly take his cell phone records, do proper interviews of him. I mean, how much of a role do you think that's going to play in jurors' minds, Rachel, that really the local police and investigators did not do as thorough an investigation of the father as they should have?
And that's where I think that the defense attorney is doing a really good job in creating this doubt, because it does make you wonder how so quickly after the father dropped off Hannah to the house that all of a sudden she's in a state, a minute and some change later, she's in a state where they have to call 911. Mm-hmm. How does that add up? Does she injure the child that quickly, or was the child injured prior to arriving at the home?
Right. I mean, there are a lot of questions, and I think that that's what obviously she's getting at with those minute-by-minute phone records. In terms of the fact, the other thing, she brings up time and time again in the course of her case is the fact she says, the failure is on the part of the state for not doing their due diligence on the dad.
Well, because if you think about it, those are the two primary suspects in a case like this. It's either with child abuse, it's usually the parents or a caretaker. So you would think that the police would have thoroughly investigated both parties that were in the picture. And the fact that, if, according to the defense, they did not, that's going to be troubling for the jurors. And I think that's why we're seeing this deliberation go on for so long. It's 4:15 now. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see I don't know if we're going to see a verdict today.
That's Jason Weshy, Hannah's father, on the stand. I mean, he's pretty matter of fact, and his answers in that clip we just watched, pretty straightforward, not much emotion, as he sort of walks through the details of the final morning he dropped Hannah off at his babysitter, Lindsay Partin's house. Is there anything that you draw from his testimony, Rachel? I mean, do you make any assessment of his character or of him from that?
Well, just from that little clip that you showed, I don't think there's a whole lot to go on. Obviously, it did raised my flag when I heard that she was laying in the back seat of a car, which usually a 3-year-old you're going to want to put in a car seat, but I understand it was a very short distance, so I'm sure he didn't feel the need to do that. Could I get a sense just from that of what kind of father he was? Not particularly.
So that's the defendant describing that morning, how she says Hannah collapsed just about 10 seconds after she came in the house after Jason dropped her off. You know, to me, she does seem sincere and emotional, and she has said that she loved the little girl. That's, of course, just this one clip of her testimony. Do you think it was the right move for her to take the stand?
Well, listen, in this case, I think that she probably felt like she had to describe what happened. I also thought that, you know, her testimony as it pertains to the exact incident of what happened was very believable. She seemed emotional on the stand, certainly more emotional than the father. But then you do have, and I think we'll probably get to some of this testimony a little bit later on, her admitting to actually hurting the child, and her not really having a clear understanding in my mind that this is not okay.
Right.
That you're not supposed to
slap
do this.
the child, shake
slap
the
children,
child,
that
right.
no matter what. And that's a little bit disturbing that she doesn't seem to have that understanding that that's not right.
Right. Well, let's give a quick update on what's going on with the jurors right now. According to our camera person in the room, as well as local reporters there in the courtroom, the jury did have a question. Apparently, they wanted an extension cord. An extension cord was brought in, as well as a number of jugs of water. So what does that tell us? Well, obviously, they're still at it, right?
Yeah, listen, 4:30 on a Friday, and they just asked for more water and an extension cord, so I don't think they're ending anytime soon.
Right.
This could go into the evening.
And I should add, the extension cord apparently is so they can replay some of the video from the trial to plug in some kind of device. We're going to take a quick break. The defense's expert witness, Dr. Werner Spitz, a forensic pathologist, whose assessment is basically that the extent of Hannah's injuries, what she died from, had to have happened before she went to the hospital, and certainly before she died, that those injuries had already happened. My question for you, Rachel, though, is, so does that mean the dad, Jason, did it? I mean, is it possible that the babysitter could have inflicted these injuries days before, even if Hannah wasn't with her the day before? I mean, what does that really tell us for sure, but just raise more questions?
I think that's exactly what it does. I think it raises more questions, because you have this defense witness, who, by the way, the defense paid $4,000 to testify, saying that he does not believe that Hannah's injuries happened right away, and that her brain may have swelled, and it could have taken several hours. So a couple of things. A, it could have happened prior to the father dropping her off at Lindsay's house, or B, like you mentioned, it could have been the result of Lindsay Partin's abuse on the child, which she has admitted to some.
Right. Right. And we didn't, you know, you still don't know. She admitted to some abuse, though the abuse she admitted to does not seem like it could have caused these kind of injuries. But again, that's what she has admitted to, and we just don't know. And honestly, I think a lot of this comes down to whether jurors, I mean, we know they've been going now almost 8 hours. Clearly, they're not decided. And I think the defense attorney put up a poster in court yesterday listing all, you know, if you think this, if you have questions about this, you know, and so on and so forth, then if you have reasonable doubt, you have to acquit. And I think that was a good graphic, because there are a lot of questions in this case. Welcome back. Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, facing prostitution charges after he was basically caught on video engaged in sex acts with a prostitute at a spa in Juniper, Florida back in January. Well, he has elected to go to trial. In the meantime, a number of media outlets have sued, saying that the state of Florida should release the video of Kraft engaging in these sex acts with the prostitutes. Well, of course, his attorneys do not want this video out. They say this is pornography. The only reason the media wants this is for eyeballs and clicks for their websites by publishing footage that is basically pornography. That's what Kraft's attorney said. What's greater, the public's right to see this video or his right for privacy?
Well, listen, Florida has very open records law, and most everything involved in an investigation usually gets released some way to the public. But this is a very interesting legal question, because you do have an invasion of privacy claim here. The fact is, you're showing someone doing something very private.
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, my guess is the sunshine laws in Florida are going to outweigh, especially if they're able to redact or blur out some of this video, are going to outweigh any kind of privacy concern that Robert Kraft has.
Interesting. I mean, if you say, if that's what the law is there, then the judge may very well decide that. I know she has asked both attorneys to basically file briefs, be back in court on Tuesday. This is after a lengthy hearing back and forth about this. I mean, yeah, what is the public's right to know in this case, though? I mean, what is his ad? If we know there's videotape or video, there's no tapes anymore, right? We know there's digital video of him engaging in this act. I mean, what?
Well, and what I thought was interesting too is that Robert Kraft's attorneys actually admit that this is pornography.
Right.
So they're pretty much admitting
Right, exactly.
that Robert Kraft did this,
Yeah.
that he was involved in this sex act. So what's their defense here?
Yeah, that is a good point on its own. And, as we're talking about with our producers, why he didn't just admit this and walk away, we don't know. We're going to keep an eye on this. They'll be back in court Tuesday.